Hey, what's up? Jason here. In this video, we're going to go through all of the steps to build out a complete Flappy Bird clone. So I have a tutorial available up on the site at unity3d.college that you can get to and kind of view this all in text format. But I wanted to go through and do it in a video so that it was easy for people to follow along and see the whole process as we go through it. So the first thing I've done is just create a new Unity project. You can see it right back there. But I also grabbed the art asset pack that's available right here. So if you go to the site, I'll have a link. You can go to it and grab the art. Then you can pull that in. It's just a little asset pack. And let's import it right now. It just contains some things like fish and seaweed, other things that are similar to Flappy Birds, just in a slightly different theme. So here we go. We're importing the pack. It's just called Birds Art. And we'll pull that right in. Although, again, there's no birds, it's actually just fish. So to get started, I want to take a quick look at the art that we have. And we're going to kick it off with the fish, since this is the most important one. So we have a fish here. It's already set to Sprite. All of these should already be set to Sprite when you import them. If you import one and it's not set to Sprite mode on the texture type, make sure that you switch it over. So if you grab some other art asset and start working with it, make sure that you do that. Now to get going, we're going to pull out the fish into the hierarchy, and we should just see a fish kind of floating in the middle of our scene view. So I'm just going to go to that fish, take a quick look at him. You can see we've got a sprite renderer and a transform, and that's about it. Now, for Flappy Bird, when we hit a key or click the screen, touch the screen, the bird kind of goes flying up in the air, right? And then falls back down. So we're going to put in some code to replicate that. We're going to put in a little script, a fish script, that'll allow our player to click the screen or click the left mouse button to make their fish or bird jump up. But before we create a script, let's go in and change the background color. So right now you see we have this skybox, and that's just because the default camera sets the clear flag to skybox, and we want to go with solid color. And then we'll pick a color. Oh, my color picker's off the screen. There we go. We'll pick a color that looks kind of watery, something kind of light and blue. Like that. And we're going to adjust that later too. Now the next thing I want to do is just grab my fish again, and we'll just add a rigid body to him. So just go rigid body 2D. Since we're doing a 2D game, we want to use the 2D components. And now if I hit play, you should see the fish just starts falling. It's exactly what I would expect to happen. The fish falls, there's a rigid body that's using gravity and nothing keeping him up. Okay, now let's get on to the script part. So I'm going to create a scripts folder. And then in here, I'm going to create a new C# script, and I'm just going to call it fish. All right, and here's our fish script. So I don't need a start method right now. I'm going to delete that, get rid of this comment, and mark this as private. Oh, oops. And then use Control-K, Control-D to kind of clean up the formatting a little. Now, what I want to do here is check the input and see if the player has clicked the fire 1. So that'll be touch, left click, or spacebar, I think. So to do that, we go if input.get button down fire 1. Again, this is bound by default to all of those inputs. It's also A on like an Xbox controller. So if that happens, what we want to do is add some force to the rigid body in an upward direction. So we can do get component rigid body 2D dot add force, and we want to go vector 2 dot up. And we want to multiply this by some force variable. So let's call this jump force. Now that doesn't exist, so what I'm going to do is generate a field for it. If you're in Visual Studio, you can just hit Control period and hit generate field, the first option, and it'll automatically generate it. But when you do that, it does generate incorrectly. It always generates a vector 2 when you're doing add force. We want a float here. So I'm just going to change that over to a float. We'll add a serialized field attribute that just makes it show up in the editor. And then I'm going to give it a default value of maybe 500 with an F at the end because it's a floating point value. Now, if we go back over to the editor, I want to select my fish and attach the fish script. Then when I press play, I should be able to left click on the game view and have my fish go flying up. And you may have seen that. He just kind of went flying really, really high. Let me stop. Play one more time and then click it and kind of watch what happens. You can see as I click it, he goes up. If I wait, he'll start falling down. If I click really, really fast, he'll just kind of start flying up in the air. Now, there's one big issue with this that's allowing me to fly way too fast, and that's that we're not stopping the fish. So here, let's get another look at that. So let's watch the fish, let him fall, and here I'm gonna hit F, hold F to make it focus on him. And now watch his Y position. He's falling pretty fast. If I click, I still can't even get him to stop falling without a bunch of clicks. So you may not have noticed, but I had to click a lot of times to get him to stop and kind of go up. What we want to do is stop the fish before he goes up. So we want him to completely stop and then do a little bit of a bump upward. Now, to do that, I need to set the velocity of the rigid body to 0 before we add the force. That'll essentially stop it from falling, or stop the fall and then add the force. But I don't want to keep calling get component rigid body 2D over and over. I want to cache that so that we don't make slow calls continuously. So here we go. I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to add an awake method. So do private void awake. And here we'll do rigid body, or actually let's just call it RB equals get component rigid body 2D. Now we need a field for this. So again, let's select it, hit control period, and generate a rigid body 2D field. And then now what I can do is just call rb.addForce right here. But first I'll call rb.velocity and set it to vector 2.0. So now we're stopping it, and then we're adding force, and we're also caching that rigid body to minimize any performance impact. Now if I hit play one more time, you should see that every time I click, the fish just kind of stops its fall and bounces up. There we go. So I can just kind of nice and even, simple bounces. And I can adjust that bounce amount, or the jump amount, just by turning up or down the jump force here. So if I turn this that's too far down. Let's just try it without it running. So if I turn this down to like 200 and hit play, you see it's probably going to be a pretty small jump. There we go. So now you see my jumps are quite a bit smaller. And this may be what you want. The value that you come up with is something that you just tune throughout gameplay. Come up with something that feels right. I think I'm going to go around 400. And let's save our scene. So we don't have a scenes folder right now, so I'm going to create a new folder called scenes. And then in here, we'll just call this fish. So now we have a scenes folder with our fish in it, and we're all saved up in case something goes wrong, or we need to just open this up later. All right, now I want to add some obstacles. So in Flappy Bird, there's the little Mario looking tubes. In this one, we're going to use some seaweed as a placeholder for that. So I'm just going to take my seaweed, drop it onto the scene, and then I'm going to move it down a bit so that it's below the player. I'm kind of looking at the game view here to get this at a point where it's not too high, not too low. I think that's probably good. Let's make these a little bit more even. Now, our seaweed is going to be a thing that the player can hit, they die, and then they start over. They want to basically just avoid it. So if I hit play right now, you'll see that the fish just falls right through the seaweed. And that's because our seaweed doesn't have a collider. Now I want to add a collider, and there are a couple options I have here. So if I search for collider, you'll see we have a box collider 2D, capsule, composite collider, polygon collider, and the new tile map one. What we want to go with is a polygon collider. So I'm just going to select polygon collider, and you should have noticed right here we got a nice green outline over the entire sprite that kind of matches with our polygon there. So now if I hit play, our fish should fall and go right through again. The reason for that is that we never added a collider to the fish. So I'm going to select the fish and also add a polygon collider. So now you see we've got a nice outline on that fish, and when I hit play this time, he should fall and roll right off. Exactly what I was looking for. Now if I hit play, I can click and avoid the fall, or even hit it and then kind of jump up and roll backwards. Not what we want, but it works now. We can hit play, we can bounce off of things, and collisions are happening at least. Now we do want the collision to kill the player and reload the level. So let's set that up. Let's create another script. Go into scripts here, right click, create, and let's call this seaweed. Actually, yeah, let's just call it seaweed. I think that's a good enough name. So I'm going to select the seaweed and add my seaweed to it. And then here, what I want to do is check for a collision and then kill the player. So I'm going to delete both of these. We don't need a start or an update. And again, Control K, Control D to clean up the formatting a little. And I'm going to add a method for collision enter. So I'll do private void on collision enter. And I'm not getting IntelliSense, but that's okay. We need a parameter called collision, and its name is collision, or a parameter of type collision named collision. Now, what I want to check is that the collision, the thing in the collision that we hit is a fish, and if it is, we just essentially want to kill the fish. So we'll do if collision.collider.getComponent fish is not equal to null. So this will just be true if we hit a fish. In that case, we just want to kill the player. And to kill the player for now, what we're going to do is just reload the current scene. So just do scene manager.load scene 0. Now save that off. And let's jump back to the editor, hit play, and see if it happens. So we should be able to, oh, we're missing a using statement for scene manager. So we need to add a using unity engine.scene management. Let's see if I got that right. I think that was it. Without the IntelliSense, it's hard to remember the casing on some of those. There we go, okay, that's it. So we hit play. And we fell, but we didn't die. So let's see why. Oh, I see the problem right here. So we're working in 2D, and I accidentally used the 3D collision methods. Since we have a 2D rigid body, this needs to be on collision enter 2D, and this is a collision 2D object and not a collision. So this should fix it up now that we've got the right thing in there. And that's something that happens a lot. I've done it more times than I can count. I've seen a lot of other people do the same thing where they just accidentally reuse or use the wrong collision method. There we go. So now every time we hit, you can see it's reloading. You can actually see the scene reloading up here too. And we're resetting the game. So this is cool. We've got it so we can jump and avoid hitting the seaweed to not die. But when you want to have seaweed on top and seaweed on bottom, and we want our seaweed moving, we want to kind of make this a little bit cooler. So let's get started with that. The first thing I want to do is add an upper seaweed. Maybe I can just balance in between the two. So I'm going to start by duplicating this existing seaweed, and then I'll zoom out a little bit. Actually, let me go to 2D view right there. Now I'm going to hit W and move it up, and then we'll rotate the thing over. So just go like that. And it looks like we want to be at about 180 or negative 180 on the Z. And that's too high up. I can't see it in the game view, so let's pull it down a bit. And just about like that. Now I'm going to play, and we should be able to kind of balance in between, maybe if I'm really careful. But if I hit the top or the bottom, I die. That's what I want to see. Now, I don't want these seaweeds just sitting still. We want them moving across the scene, and we want to have a bunch of seaweed. So what we're going to do is create a parent for these two seaweed objects. So I'm going to right click just on empty white space in the hierarchy and hit create empty. And I'm going to reset the position here. I want this at 0, 0, 0. And then I'll make both of these seaweeds a child of the game object. And I'm going to name this thing seaweed. And we'll name this one bottom, seaweed bottom. And this one will be seaweed top. Now, our seaweed is going to need to move off to the left. Well, technically, what you expect to see is that your fish is swimming through, going off to the right. But what's really happening is the seaweed's just moving by, and the fish is going to stay still. So to make that happen, we need another script that moves the seaweed to the left. So I'm going to create a new script here, a C# script, and we'll call this move left. And I'm going to select my seaweed and attach that script. And then we'll go in and write some code. So what we want here is to update, or in the update, move our seaweed just a little bit to the left every frame based off of how much time has passed. Now, we're also going to want to have a variable so we can adjust the speed of that. So I'm going to start by creating that. First, we'll go serialize field, and then we'll do a private float speed. And let's default it to 1. Now, in the update, we want to do transform.position plus equals time.delta time times speed times vector 2.left. And let's just mark that explicitly private. Doesn't make any actual difference. I just like to see it there. Oh, this should be a vector 3. There we go, not 2. Now, we jump back over and let's watch our seaweed and see if it just kind of moves off to the left. There we go. So you can see the seaweed's moving. I'm going to let my fish fall and just adjust the speed. If I turn it down, see it slows down. If I make it negative, it actually goes right. And if I speed it up, it goes over to the left at a decent speed. I think maybe a speed of about 2 or 3 is going to be good for now. So let's set that. Let's go with 2.5, right in the middle. Now I want to create a folder for prefabs. So I'm going to right click in Assets, hit Create Folder, and name it Prefabs. And what we're going to do is take the seaweed and drop that into this prefabs folder. When we do that, you'll see it turns blue up here. That just means that it is a prefab. And since it's a prefab, if I change something on the prefab in the asset, it'll actually update the placed one in the hierarchy here. So if I adjust the speed here to maybe 4 and select the seaweed, you'll see the speed has changed to 4. If I expand out this thing and maybe disable the bottom, see the bottom disabled for the one that's in our hierarchy too. And that's useful because we're going to be creating multiple seaweeds and we want to be able to update them all at once. So I'm going to create another seaweed. I'll just select this parent here. I just collapsed it to make it easier to see. And we hit Control or Command D, depending on your system. And then we're going to just drag it over. So I'm holding Control to just drag it and snap while we hold it. If you hold Control, you'll see that we're getting full values on the position X. If I let go of Control, you'll see we can move it any variable amount, but I want these to be even numbers. So, I've kind of lost it there from undoing it, but I want this at 5. Now I'm going to duplicate this one again and hold Control and drag it over to 10. Duplicate again, go over to 15, and I'm going to keep doing this until I get to 25. There we go, one more. I think 6 is the right number here. So let's press play and see what happens. Should be able to just kind of swim through a bunch of seaweed. Oh, if I could live. I'm not very good at this. Oh, okay, let's see. Can I do it? There we go. So I made it past all the seaweed and now the game's over, right? But we can fix that. What we want to do is make it so that our seaweed, when it reaches a far enough point to the left, it just resets over to the right. So what we're going to do is open up our move left script again. And right here, we're going to check to see if the transform.position.x value is less than or equal to, let's go with -15 for now. Maybe we should make this a variable. But if it's less than that, what we're going to do is just set it. So we'll set the position. We'll do transform.position, equals, and we'll do a new vector 3 because we can't just change a single variable of a position or a vector 3 position. And what we want to do is set this to 15, and then our existing position, so that would be transform.position.y and transform.position.z. So this is going to take it, when it hits the far left, it'll bounce over to the far right. And let's see how that looks in game. What I'm going to do now, though, is just turn off my fish so that I don't die and have to keep watching it reload and I don't have to try to balance. So let's just watch the seaweed go over. Once it hits a certain point, it should just reset. There we go. Let's watch an actual seaweed. I've got this one selected. You'll see that when it goes over to the left, it kind of bounces back to the right. And it may seem like, this was perfect, the numbers were perfect, just because I've played with them before. I've done this a couple times, and I vaguely remembered that 15 was the point where I wanted it to be to pop back over and match up evenly. So we've got that set up, and we could swim through these things, but it's still kind of easy. In fact, let's go back to my fish. Let's turn this down to maybe 350 and turn my fish back on, and you see, it's pretty simple. I can just keep clicking about the same time, every time, forever, and it just keep going, right? There's no difficulty. And that's because the height of these things is completely static. Now, in Flappy Bird, they go up, they go down. There's a lot of variance there, some randomness, and it helps a lot to make it more interesting and more difficult. But that's an easy thing to replicate. We just go into our move left script, and we're going to add a random height offset field. So I'm going to just type in serialize field, so it's again visible in the inspector. We'll do private float random offset, and we're going to set it to default of maybe 2. Now, what this is going to do is give us just a range where we can bounce up or down the object. In fact, let's look at it before we code it. Let's take a look at one of these seaweeds. Let's go with the first one. So say I want it to appear either maybe up to here or down to here. I guess that would be -2 and +2. That's kind of our range that we're going with. To do that, we're just going to not use the transform.position.y. Instead, we'll pick a random position. So I'm going to delete that, and I'll do float random height equals unity engine.rand. Oh, didn't spell engine right. engine.random.range, and we're going to go from negative random offset to positive random offset. And then we'll just pass in random height for the new position. So now if we go back over and hit play, our seaweed should just kind of reappear. The first time through, it's going to be all the same height. Oh, my fish, he's dying. Let's turn him off. There we go. And I'm going to save my scene just in case something bad happens. Now let's watch. The seaweeds over here should just start appearing at random heights. There you go. So you can see we've started to add some difficulty already. Totally random. We don't know. It could be, all the way at the bottom, all the way at the top, or whatever within our 2.0 range, to positive or negative. So now I want to add some ground. We have, if you look in the art folder, a ground sprite here, and we're actually not going to use it as a sprite. We're going to switch it back over to a normal texture. So I'm going to switch it back to default and hit apply. And then what I want to do is create a quad. So I'll go to 3D object and quad. Now, we could use a sprite, move the sprite over, and then bounce it over and set up a couple sprites to do that. And that's one way to do it. It works. But what I want to do instead is use some mesh or texture offsets on our quad here to scroll it across the screen instead. So I'm going to position this thing down near the bottom a bit, right about there. And then I want to stretch it out on the X. I think, let's see, 20 is probably good. And then we'll assign the ground to it. So I'm just going to drop the ground right on here. Again, it has to be set to default. If you left it on Sprite, you won't be able to drop it onto there. So let's see, how does that look? Let's take a quick look right here. I think it's fine. Looks like we can see the transparency. Everything looks okay. I do want to pull it forward though, because I want it in front of the seaweed. So I'm going to select my quad, and first I'll rename it to ground. And then let's switch over to 3D view, and I'm going to go over here and just kind of look at it where it's at. You can see here that the Z value is 1. I'm going to set it to, let's see, 0 is good, but then when I put it to 0, see it kind of popped off the screen. So I set it to 0, and then I'm just going to drag it right up here. So it's just above the, or just in front of the other seaweeds there. Now if I hit play again, you see that the ground doesn't move, and the seaweed just kind of scrolls along. It's okay, but it looks kind of weird, right? This needs to scroll along, and that's what I was talking about with the texture offsets. So we're going to create another script here, and we're going to call it ground. So in this script, we don't need a start method. We do need update though. So I'm going to delete all that out and explicitly mark this again as private. Again, doesn't make any difference. I just prefer looking at it that way. And the first thing we want to do is get the current offset of the texture. In fact, let's jump over to the editor real quick and just show what this is going to look like. So if I select the ground here and then expand out the material here, see we have an offset variable, and if I drag this left or right, you can see it does that scrolling. This is the effect that we want to go for. So let's make one other little change too. I want to select the shader here, and let's change it from unlit transparent to transparent cutout. There we go. Get rid of a little bit of that extra noise that was there in our ground. There's a little bit of a line there you may have seen. Switching it to cutout should fix that right up. Now what we're going to do again in our script is just update that offset. So we're going to go back into the ground script, and we want to get the current offset first. So we'll do var current texture offset equals get component renderer dot material dot get texture offset, and then we have to give it the name of the texture, which is just underscore main text. So this is going to get our main texture, and we're going to get the offset of it. Now you might notice here that we're getting the renderer, and we're doing this every frame. We should probably cache this. So in fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to call this just rend. Renderer is already there, but that again does a call behind the scenes. And we're going to add an awake method. So the private void awake, I will do rend equals get component renderer, and then I'll select rend and hit control period and generate that field, and we're good to go. So now we're getting the current offset, and this is just a vector 2. I put var there. Let's put vector 2. Make it really explicit what we're doing. The next thing we want to do is figure out how much we need to move the texture, and that's going to be based off of a speed variable and time. So we'll do float distance to scroll left equals time.delta time times scroll speed. Now we don't have a scroll speed variable, so we'll generate that, control period, generate the field, and I'm going to add the serialized field attribute so it shows up in the editor, and give it a default value of 1. No, let's give a default value of 5. Let's crank that up. And I want to move this up just above the other one. I like to have my serialized fields that are in the editor right up at the top, followed by private fields. Just keep them nice and orderly. Now, we have the amount that we want to scroll it, and we need to figure out the new x value. So this is going to be how far we're moving that x. So we'll go float new x offset equals current texture offset dot x plus distance to scroll left. Now we call, what do we need? We need to create a new vector 2. So do vector 2 new offset equals new vector 2, and we're going to give it the new x offset, and we'll give the current y offset because we're not changing the y. And we're almost done. We need to make one more call though to set the texture offset. So right now we've got it in a vector 2. We need to actually pass this into the material and do the offsetting. So do rend.material.set texture offset. And again, we need to give it the name, which is that main text. And then we have to pass in the vector 2, which is new offset. Let's save that off, and let's delete these extra using statements. They're light gray because they're not there. They're not used using statements. And we'll go back into the editor, select our ground, and make sure that the ground script is on it. There we go. See, we've got it here. We've got our scroll speed of 5. If I press play, we should see the ground go scrolling by. Now that's obviously way too fast, right? We need to slow that down. That's why we have this scroll speed variable. If I click right here, just on the text, you see you get the arrows. I can just drag until I get to a value that looks right. So what I'm looking for is a value where the ground and the seaweed look like they're going exactly the same. So 2.4 is not it. 2.4 is it. 2.47 was not it. So 2.4 is the value that I want. Now since I'm in play mode, as soon as I stop playing, it's going to disappear. But it was an easy enough number to memorize that just put it right back in. Now I think I need to move this forward a little bit more. So I'm going to go to negative 0.1 just so that I force and make sure that I'm in front of that ground. And let me save one more time. Now let's press play and just make sure that the ground and seaweed look right. And then we should see some randomization in just a second. I think it's going to be the next one. There we go. Now we're getting random heights. Perfect. So we also have a couple little creatures in here. There's a clam, a crab, and a starfish. And I want to use those as props. So what I'm going to do is drop out the crab first. Just put him into the scene. And let's drag him down so he's kind of over here, kind of on top of the grass, or on top of the dirt. And I'm going to scale him up. So you hit R to switch to the scale tool. And let's just give him a little bit of little bit of size there, so he's not so tiny. And then we'll move his Z position forward just a bit so it looks like he's standing on the dirt, not behind the dirt. Now, we already have a script that moves left, so what I want to do is just reuse that. So I'm going to add a component, and this time I'm going to go through here, and we'll just add move left. But we don't want a random offset, right? We want him to stay kind of at that height. We don't want him bouncing up into the middle of our screen or anything. So I'm going to set the random offset to 0. And then I'll save and press play. And let's just watch what he does. So there he goes. He's kind of walking by slowly. He doesn't exactly match, so it kind of looks like he's running forward. If I want him to match the speed, I can just set him to 2.5. And here, let's zoom out. Where's our crab? And there he goes. Now look what happened. In just a second, you see he came back right in the middle. And the reason for that is our move left script always picks a random height. And if it's 0 and 0, it's just going to pick the value of 0. So our random offset was 0, so we're picking, you know, a value between 0 and 0. So what I want to do instead is check to see if the random offset is 0. And if it is, I want to use the existing Y position instead. So here I'll just go if random offset equals 0, we'll do some code, else do the existing thing. So if we don't have a 0, we'll go through and pick a random height and set the position to that. And if we do have a 0, I'm going to copy this line, line 25, paste it up here, and instead of random height, we'll do transform.position.y. Now if I jump back over to the editor, and let's set this guy up. I think it was 2.5 was the speed we were at, so let's set him back to 2.5 with a 0 offset and hit play. He should just go over to the left. I guess 2.5 isn't quite right. It's close though. Let's see, he gets to the left and then he pops back over to the right and he's at the right side. So let's see, what's the right speed here? Oh, definitely not 23. Was it 5? Let me select my seaweed and see. Oh, 4. Set it to 4. There we go. So get this guy at 4, save our scene, and we should see him walking by. Now these guys don't do anything. They're just there as props to add a little bit of extra flair to the game, make it look a little bit less boring and bland. So we can just create more of these. So let's do it a little bit different this time though. So instead of dragging one of these out like the starfish or the clam, let's duplicate the crab. And let's just swap out the sprite. So right here we have the sprite, and I can just put the starfish sprite there. Now he's already scaled right, and I can move him over a bit. So maybe it goes right about there. Actually, let's pull him down a little bit because I want him not at the exact same height. So we got a starfish there, and I'm going to rename this thing to starfish. And then we'll duplicate one more time, and let's just pull something over here, kind of off the screen. The player's not going to see it right at the beginning. And let's make that the clam. So we'll drop the clam up into the sprite renderer area and name this thing clam, not clan, and hit play. Now we should see, there we go, we get a clam, crab, a starfish. I should probably split these out a little bit more so they're not so packed together, but I think we're good for now. So let's save this off. And the next thing I want to do is add a couple of checks. There are a couple ways that we can cheat right now. So if I enable our fish and hit play, let's see if we can get it to happen. I think I'm going to hit that seaweed. Well, let's say I'm skilled. Here, let's see if I can do it. Oh, there we go. Oh, I missed it. I'm definitely not good at this. Okay. I'm going to fake it so that I can cheat because I'm very terrible at Flappy Bird. So if let's just disable this seaweed real quick just so I can show the problem. So if you look here, if I'm good enough, I'm able to get my fish down below and then it'll just keep going on forever because I can't hit these colliders anymore. My fish is way down there. So I look down there, you can see he's just falling. You can see his Y position. And we could also do the same and go up over these seaweeds if we were good. So we want to add in a little bit of extra cheat protection here and just go to our fish script. So I've got the fish selected. We'll open up the fish script. And here I'm just going to check if the transform.position.x is greater than, and let's see, what's a good value here? I'm just going to grab my fish and drag it up. So I get greater than, 11, or maybe 10, greater than 10, or less than, what's a good negative value? Negative, or where's the ground right here? So negative 4. So if I go above 10 or less than negative 4, those are the values I want to use. Then I'm going to kill the player. So we'll do if position.x is greater than, what is it, 10, or transform.position.x is less than negative 4, and we'll just kill the player. And again, to kill the player, we're just doing scene manager, and here let's add that using statement, control period to add the using statement, dot load scene 0. And now if I go back in, let me turn that seaweed off one more time. You should see that when I fall too far down, I die. Didn't happen. Let's see why. Let's save. Let's go right back in here. We have the script on the fish. We are saved, right? Position dot. Oh, I did the wrong variable. It's y, not x. There we go. Let's try one more time. Hit play. Now when I fall through, I should die. And same if I try to go too high up. There we go. I can't go up over the seaweeds. I can get up there, kind of get lost, and maybe fall back down, but if I go too high, I'm dead. So the last thing I want to add here is a background. Right now our current background is solid blue. It's kind of boring, kind of lame. So let's search on Google and find a good undersea image. So here are a couple. I think the first time I went with a pretty cartoony one. This time I'm going to go with something a little different. Let's go for, I think I'm going to try this. So this one's a 1920 by 1080 image. Just download this and let's see how it looks. Let's do, actually that's going to look a little bit weird, I think, with the seaweed coming down. I'm going to try it anyway. So here, let's save this off. And then we'll drop that into our projects. So just drop that into the art folder. And then we'll drop it onto our scene. Oh, we can't drop it into the scene because it's not set to a sprite. Change the texture type to a sprite. Hit apply. And then drop it into the scene. And we'll get a nice sprite. Here, let's drop it right there into the hierarchy so that it gets zeroed in the positions. So this is pretty good, but I need to move it backward. So I'm just going to go in 3D mode and just drag it back. Maybe like that. And then let's scale it up so that it covers our entire scene and move it up maybe just like that. There we go. Now save and press play. And now, oh, what do we got there? I think the, let's take a look. So what's happening here is that our undersea light right here, or my background, that's the name of it, is rendering kind of at the same level, the same order as these seaweeds, and it doesn't know which one's supposed to be in front, which one's supposed to be in back, so it just gets kind of random, and this could be up here or down there, it doesn't really matter. The point that we need to, or the thing we need to change is this order in layer. So if I change this to -1 and hit play, you'll see that now the background is always behind the foreground here. So our seaweed always shows up in front, even once we start getting random positions. And I've disabled my fish again just to test this and see it all. And I think that's just about everything we need. So I've got, let's see, let's re-enable my fish one more time. I'm gonna hit play once more and swim through. Oh, I still have seaweed 1 turned off. So we have that little extra gap there, but I can, oh, I can play and die. Like I said, not very good at this game, but it's fun to build. So if you want to build this yourself, feel free to hop over to the link below and grab the art pack or go through the text version of this tutorial. And there I also have an extra little step where you can add in some bubbles that float up. You can pop them for points and then see your score on screen. And if you like the video, of course, don't forget to like, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. And thanks for watching.